Hey, good morning.
Morning.
How's it going?
Doing all right.
Apparently, we're already being recorded.
Yeah, the recording starts as soon as someone enters the room. So,
Oh, interesting. Okay.
and then Ram edits it down later to the pertinent portions.
Okay.
Morning.
Morning.
You grab the document link, drop it in chat periodically. We've got one from Tim. Cool, Tim's here. Give it maybe another couple minutes to allow people to show up, but if you have additional topics you'd like to add, please do so. Howdy. So we're just giving a couple minutes for anyone else to show up. I'm going to drop the link to the document in chat again. If anyone would like to add a topic to discuss, probably going to be a little light on topics looking at it so far, but always good to have the forum. And then we'll take whatever time we need and then go on our merry way.
Do we know if Giuseppe or Georgie is joining?
I do not. But looks like we got someone at least new to me. Welcome, John. Thanks for showing up. I'm going to again drop the link to the document of topics in chat. So if you have one you would like to add, feel free to do so. I'll also just sort of have an open floor if you wanted to talk about sort of anything in general. But we'll get started in about a minute. All right, well, if anyone else shows up, then we can bring them into the fold on the fly. But thank you everyone who's here for again attending the K8s Working Group Forum. We're just trying to provide open space for everyone to discuss the various topics that are germane to the Cloud Foundry on Kubernetes space. Oh, and we got one more. Welcome. Two more. Okay, I'll be dropping that chat document link again for everyone to add topics. Feel free to add them. I think we can have our first topic rolling with Tim on HNC propagation.
Yeah, might not be interesting for many of the people who have just joined, and some of the people I want to talk with aren't here. So I'll give the brief update here. We're planning on using HNC which is the hierarchical namespaces controller, to propagate service accounts and other objects across the namespaces that are created with CF create space and CF create org. And as we've tried to use it in earnest, I've found that like its ability to propagate service accounts is a little wonky. And that is because service accounts themselves are reconciled by this core Kubernetes controller called the token controller, which generates secrets for them. And the secrets need to like be in every namespace in which they exist. And HNC has like hard coded some logic to avoid propagating those secrets, because I think that would actually break things more, but it also makes it like difficult for us to actually propagate service accounts with this. So I was bringing this up here to see if any of the folks over on the UMEA side like had more thoughts here, but in my opinion, it's like kind of like not looking so good. Like I'm not sure if the benefits we're getting from agency are super useful. If it's like if we might have to like manually manipulate these and propagate the service accounts themselves. I also like was surprised to see how aggressive it is in terms of permissions. Like it sets up a webhook that like validates on the wildcard object type. So literally every creation or update or anything of any object on the cluster has to go through HNC, which is also perhaps not ideal. So TLDR is I might put together just like, I don't know, a quick little thing about like perhaps not using. Okay, we got some folks.
Hey, sorry, we had another meeting that ran over with the supposedly new garden team. So
All good. Welcome to the party. We basically just got started. Tim was explaining some of the difficulties he's been having with HNC propagation. I don't know, Tim, if you want to try to briefly summarize that, because I think they might have some context.
Yes. The TLDR of what I've just was talking about was I'm not positive that agency works very well with service accounts. And I think that might be an issue given how that's like our primary use case for it. I'm wondering if y'all during your explorations on it, like got it to successfully propagate them such that they were usable, or like if I'm just doing something wrong with it.
We weren't really doing service accounts when we were exploring it. We're looking at role bindings generally. So
Okay.
I know Giuseppe had a quick look at the code earlier and saw the whole the code for the secrets as if it's a service account token, then no, it does not propagate and there's no way to override that. So I see your problem there. It's I guess the other thing is just so what is the setup for having to have service accounts in every single namespace? So does that mean you've got controllers that are running like one per namespace, or?
No, it's a requirement from Kpack. So to be able to stage apps in the appropriate spaces that line up with them, you need a service account for Kpack to use, and I believe it runs the build pods with that service account, and that's how it lines it up with the image pull secrets and everything.
Just trying to think how like Arena used to cope with stuff like that with dynamic. Well, it didn't really have dynamic namespaces though, did it? I guess that was the thing. You knew them at install time, and then we just gave permissions across them. And yeah, so I don't know, nothing springs to my mind there on what we can do about that.
does it mean that we need to, like the outcome that we want is every space namespace has its own service account?
At least for Kpack's sake, yes. And the reason why is we really want to be able to run the staging pods in the same namespace as the apps, or at least in discrete namespaces. Primarily for log output reasons. Like we want the same RBAC to be in play that is normally there, like for staging as it is for running. But also like, yeah, I guess this is the same concern it's a tenancy related concern. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Maybe we should be setting up the service account that's needed for Kpack when we create this the space.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, maybe we should just, because there is a specific reason they don't propagate, which is, I think, the comments in the code basically say if we propagate this, would be basically working against the Kubernetes controllers, and we don't want to do that. So that kind of suggests that we want to achieve the same outcome differently in a way that doesn't like go against the grain of what Kubernetes usually does. So the first thing I was thinking was exactly that, like we just create it. It's a bit annoying because like if I mean, if you use the shim, then I guess we could add that to the shim, and just the shim just creates a service account every time, possibly. Like if you don't want to use the shim, then of course it becomes annoying. But we've already discussed having CRDs for orgs and spaces, so maybe that's where,
yeah,
that's one extra point for going in that direction.
Yeah, I think so. I think there will be value in that. Like I was also surprised to see, like I'm not saying like we like rip out HNC or anything. But I was also surprised to see that like it sets up webhooks like on every object in the cluster. And I could see that being not agreeable to some operators out there. So like if we have the CRDs, then there could be like also an alternative to it where like you make the CRDs and then like an operator could set up the namespaces or whatever, and the controller could put the appropriate service accounts and stuff in those. That's a separate issue. I think what you're saying about maybe for expediency, like in the shim, it could do this for now, and then like.
Yeah, I mean, they have webhooks, but those are needed for them to, I think, keep a coherent hierarchy. Among the other things, I don't know what all the webhooks are, but like the one I've hit from time to time playing with it is like if you try to delete something and this thing is not empty or something, it tells you can't do it or stuff like that. Like it doesn't allow you to mess up the hierarchy. So if we replace this with something else, there's a chance that we would need the same validations. No,
I guess the one I'm talking about is this one. That's a webhook applied to the wildcard API group.
Yeah. It's because you can dynamically assign propagation. So
okay.
So I guess it has to. They've set it up so it listens on absolutely everything. Unfortunately, yeah. There's no like initial config that it looks at and stays like that. You can change it by modifying the HNC configuration at any point in time. Yeah, grim.
Yeah, like, I mean, I get why they need it. I'm just like, when I saw that, I like, I'm saying like thinking just like in terms of an operator, they might not be too fond of that one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess either we would have to think about an alternative to those to replace them, or maybe a way to make it less invasive, maybe so it only applies to objects belonging to a subset of the cluster. I don't know how you would do that.
Yeah, like that's, I mean, for the sake of the immediate problem, like I made a story where we just want to be able to run and stage apps in spaces that we create with this CLI. This was just like something I found while I was going on my journey last night. But anyways, it sounds like we should probably disable the propagation of service accounts, because that doesn't work, and it will like probably step on anything we do, and like look into updating the API to try to create these.
And this is just for spaces, not for orgs.
Yeah, it's for spaces because
That's where the apps.
that's where the
live.
apps run in stage.
Is it worth looking at Kpack to see if it would be possible to alleviate some of the immediate concern? Like, is there a way to configure that? Do we think?
No, it only takes a name. So it will only look in the same namespace as the Kpack image.
All right, that's unfortunate. Maybe a feature request or something down the line. But yeah,
Maybe. I think I don't even know if you can do like cross namespace, like image pull secrets and stuff. Like I think it, in terms of how they're actually using the service account, I think it might make sense, like for it to be scoped to the namespace.
yeah. Well, some good information, things to look into. Many other comments on this topic, questions, concerns? Going once?
Well, so this is going to be an absolute sort of killer for HNC then, I suppose. It's a bit of a shame because then, well, I don't know, there's a fair bit of work to get that whole replication of roles working nicely.
It's not a kill. I mean, I think as long as the roles work for it, like we could still use it for roles. I think it's just not sufficient on its own.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so then we just do a manual service account and secret thing. Yeah, I see. Okay. Oh yeah, that'll keep us going for a while anyway. Well, we can.
Yeah, but I think it is like definitely pointing towards the, like, we should make those like Oregon space controllers and move some of that and out of the API, and
Yeah.
it's definitely pointing to some value for having an abstraction there.
Yeah, I definitely would caution against immediately going and trying to rip HNC out. It sounds like it probably still provides value in certain areas, and then we can disable certain facets of it and then supplement it with some of our own stuff until we decide, well, maybe that will be what we go with long term, but at least would give us some room to breathe. So cool.
It's also an API that it might just become part of core. I don't know exactly what if that's going to happen or when, but it looks very official.
Yes.
So there's a risk that it eventually just becomes Kubernetes. So there's no option anymore. That's just how namespaces are going to work in a way. Of course, you don't have to use them. But...
Yeah, I think right now it's just early days for it, which might be what we're betting up against. Like, I was also surprised to see, like, there was an issue for like it propagating some Istio config and like stepping on Istio's toes, and their like workaround for it was just a hard code like the names of the resources that Istio was making. I was like, what the heck? But anyways, I think you're right that like it's still like pre 1.0, and like as it matures, I think right now we're just hitting a use case where like its previous service account behavior was worse than what we're getting right now. Because I think it was like locking up the cluster as agency and the token controller were fighting over these secrets. So this was what they did in the interim, at least.
Fun. Cool. Well, last call for comments on this one. All right, then we're moving along to, we have a topic about binding service accounts.
Yeah, so we've we've noticed that we have this bit of discrepancy between CF and K8s when it comes to types of users, because in CF there's just users, but in Kubernetes there is two types of users. One is actual users, which is humans, and then there's service accounts, which are treated kind of differently. And at the moment, I think in our role binding code, where you try to assign a role to some user, we just hardcode the fact that the subject of the role binding is a user. But that means that via the API, you can never bind any role to a service account. So we were thinking about kind of extending the API with a field that wouldn't make any sense in CF, and it's not part of the CF spec, but it would make sense in Kubernetes if people want to leverage service accounts. For example, for automation, because I think in CF people automate by just making the CLI login and passing the password by a standard out or something. Well, in Kubernetes, there is proper ways of doing this by using service accounts. But I've now, as we talked about the issues with HNCs, I've just realized that maybe this might not work as well if we have these HNC problems. I'm probably breaking up, but hopefully the message got through.
I was just wondering what the HNC problems were. I mean, I just had a little stab at it as well. So I was changing the end-to-end test code to use the API rather than create K8s objects directly. And I got a bit of a surprise when half the roles that were created by tokens were not being recognized. And then it's because it was setting them up as users instead of services accounts. But it seems like quite a nice thing to do to have a kind field in the role, in the create role request, and it can default to user if it's not set. And we can set it to service account if we need it to be service account. So at the moment, I could see people doing a CF curl or something, maybe if they really wanted to do it from the CF CLI to go and set that. And then maybe in the future, we can add an option to the CLI so that you can specify that. But I don't know, it seems to fit kind of secretly and nicely at the moment with the K8s side of things. Don't know.
The problem is always like if service accounts are namespace, that is a bit hard, isn't it? Like, how do you know like which service account are you talking about if they're namespaced?
Because you always pass this org or space in the request, and that's your namespace.
Ah, right. Very good point. Yeah, so that maybe works. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, in general, just a shout out, this would be the first time we would like kind of enrich the CF API with Kubernetes specific things, which don't break backwards compatibility, but kind of add new stuff on top of CF, which are Kubernetes specific. I don't know what people think about these kind of things.
Sorry, I'm just trying to type up a note or two about this.
And while you're there on users and service accounts, you can also bind groups, which takes it even further out. So there's no real way of doing that in the CF CLI, but if somebody wanted to assign groups rather than users, it'd be another way to do it.
And those are things that would just be going on to like a rule binding in that namespace that's we're managing via the API layer, or maybe in the future like an org or a space controller.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Okay, yeah. So like right now, people would have a workaround where they could add those other subjects directly on that or any other rule binding, right? If they wanted to set that up.
Yep. I mean, they'd kind of be forced to do that. So if you're trying to do unattended stuff, our recommended way is to create a service account and use the token from that to provide the authentication. And then you've got to go and authorize that account somehow. So that would either, that would be literally creating a role binding in K8s directly at the moment. This opens it up, makes it a bit more user friendly, if you like, or goods.
Yeah, I think being able to certainly like officially register a service account for operations within a space. Like that definitely sounds really valuable. Given that, assuming that whatever we're doing to propagate user roles into the appropriate role binding wouldn't interfere with those. Like if that's the case, I would think that extending the API wouldn't be very high priority, but it seems like something we could certainly figure out how to do. And it might be worth at least discussing with the runtime interfaces group just to see one, make sure they wouldn't have any objections, and to see how this might play into any changes they could be thinking about, or might have inklings of on the CF for VM side.
Yeah, like one of the things I'm wondering is how do they handle today the UAA user versus UAA client distinction here? Because like the CLI has a special flow for UAA clients, which like I know they're different, but conceptually is similar in use case to a service account. But maybe that's just abstracted away on the API. I had a question on the doc, on our notes doc. What endpoint were you thinking of adding to specifically?
The post on roles,
That
V3
with-
roles.
Why did they not have it documented?
Or create role in the API.
Oh, it's on create role.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I see.
If you have the URI for that, feel free to add it, Tim.
Yeah, I just got it. I'll add it.
Yeah, definitely. If we want to add some functionality like that, want to have the default case be the expected CF API behavior. I could see enhancements working. And like you said, you could do a CF curl if you wanted to sort of get that functionality without making a direct change to the CLI.
Yeah, the way they've structured this API with this relationships object makes it pretty amenable to things like what we're suggesting. So it looks good.
Cool.
Like even if we like namespaced our type or whatever with like Kubernetes, like I think it would be very unlikely for us to step on toes. Not saying we shouldn't reach out to runtime team, but this API looks better than like what I expected for doing this.
Okay, so do you recommend instead of having user, you'd have a service account there under relationships and then be able to deal with that?
Yeah, or even like Kubernetes service account or something. Like I don't think there would be a CF for VM service account, but just to disambiguate it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, probably add any more thoughts you have on this topic, or we can move on. We are at the end of the topics in the document. We're about a half an hour in. So unless there are last minute thoughts on what we've already discussed, I'd like to open the floor to anything anyone wants to discuss, questions, comments, concerns. Welcome to all of the people that are here for first or second time. Glad to have you. Please show up anytime you want to talk about us and think about what we're doing and get involved. Yeah, so any topics anyone wants to bring up? Sounds a little quiet on the Western Front. If anyone's thinking about it, please just raise your hand and speak up. But as sort of like a logistics thing, we're sort of heading into holiday season. So I expect that the meeting schedule will get a little bit interesting as we sort of dance around the holidays. Current plan is still to mostly run the meetings, but I would understand if people were not showing up with a torrent of topics to discuss. So don't feel too badly if you aren't going to make those meetings. Yeah, still planning on running them for the most part. All right. As much as I love hearing myself speak, I'm going to let everyone get back to whatever they're up to right now, their lives. Thanks again, everyone, for coming and discussing. This is a lot of good stuff to think about. So I'm looking forward to digging into that in the future. All right, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good one.